Have you ever had a thought? Just a tiny little thought.
Oh, this looks cool.
And that worked, so you kept going.
Hold on. Wait a minute, that works?
And before you knew it, you were down the rabbit hole. And one thing led to another, and another, and another. And you don't even realize that it's happening.
Wait, what just happened? Why is this broken now? I just wasted the last 3 days for nothing.
These past few weeks have been the most challenging I have ever had as a developer. The highs were high, the lows were low, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. I want Noia to be the best game that I can make it. This was just another step on that journey. Hello everyone and welcome back to Noia Dev, the series that aims to prove that one developer can create a successful MMORPG. My name is Dane, and this week on Noia Dev we're talking about the big leap from 2D to 3D. Back in the very early stages of development, I decided that I wanted Noia to have a 2.5D perspective. This was inspired by a game demo that I saw for a game called Tinkertown. Specifically in these two areas, these ice fields and desert, you can clearly see that despite looking like a 2D game, the objects have a tiny bit of depth, and this is the effect that I wanted. So I would stand up all the objects in my game by rotating them just 10 degrees, and I was pretty happy with this look for a while. Work kept going on Noia for 2 years until I saw the trailer for The Ballad of Bellum. This trailer showed me what Noia could be if I pushed the envelope just a little bit farther. First things first, I needed to see if this was even a viable look for Noia. The camera angle in Bellum is very low, and I didn't think that that would necessarily work for Noia's combat style. So I tried rotating the camera angle a bit by bit, but the more I tilted the camera, the more work I was creating for myself, and the more uneasy I started getting. I could tilt the camera 10 degrees and still keep the 2D ground, but anything past that risked shattering the 2D illusion. So I pushed the angle to 30 degrees. Buckle up! We got some problems to solve. So the first thing that I needed to solve was a way to get the player, a flat 2D sprite, to work in a 3D world. Major trigger warning here, I did something very, very stupid and very wrong trying to figure this out. So if you happen to shout at your screen in the next few minutes, "Dane, you idiot!" I want you to know you are correct. I wanted a way to quickly put up walls, and I found a free tool called Pro Builder. I could drop a material onto these walls, and I could easily pull the walls in any direction that I wanted, and it just worked. These walls blocked line of sight like you'd expect a wall to do. See, up until now, I had only worked with sprites, and sprites, by default, don't block line of sight. Sprites use a render order. Anything with a larger render order will be rendered on top of anything with a lower render order. Its position in 3D space doesn't matter. Hence my shocked disbelief.
Hold on. Wait a minute, that works?
While I was tinkering around with making some grass particle effects, I foolishly thought that I needed to get my player sprite to be rendered using a material and not a sprite, so that it could make use of the Unity depth buffer and render the player walking through the grass rather than over it. So I spent 3 days tinkering around with custom shader code so that I could take all of the player equipment sprites, build a giant 2D texture array, and one by one overlay each equipment sprite onto the player body sprite and output that completed character sprite sheet as one single texture. And it almost worked. I built the player sprite properly as one single texture, but animating it had a lot of jittery, shaky movements that I never actually managed to fix. At this point, I had learned a lot more about shaders and materials and quads and all this other fun stuff, and one day while I was working on my old sprite shader, I spotted this drop-down option. That drop-down option called depth right forced my sprite renderer to write to the depth buffer. So now, rather than relying on some arbitrary sorting order, Unity can see exactly where the object is in 3D space and properly render things in front or behind it. It's fine. I learned some pretty neat stuff about shaders, I guess. Hey, at least I didn't entirely rewrite the, animation portion of my game, because boy, that would have been really embarrassing. However, what I did have to do with the player animations now is change how the player's hands move during animations. Before, the attack animations would modify the sort order based on if the player's hands need to be in front or behind. Now the animations need to modify the Z position in order to move the hands in front to back. Small change, not that big of a deal. While I was doing this, I learned another thing. If you move a part of your animated hierarchy around and break your animations, you simply have to rename the broken part to the correct name of the new part. This isn't documented anywhere, so there you go. Moving on, the next challenge to tackle was how I was going to get the player to move up and down in elevation. Noia uses a 2D nav mesh to indicate where the player is allowed to walk. I can't elevate the player on the Z axis. It will no longer be on the nav mesh and therefore will not be able to move, but I can fake it with math! Instead of moving the player object, I just have to move the player sprite. Ta-da! As far as the server is concerned, the player object is still down at elevation 0, but as the player moves up the ramp, trigonometry magic happens and moves the player sprite up. This part actually wasn't all that hard. What was hard was the damn raycasting! Up till now, Noia used click to move that simply casted a ray down to a specific elevation, Z0, and then told the player to walk there. But that won't work anymore because of trigonometry. So I had to devise a way for the player to click the elevated floor and detect if there were solid tiles there. Problem is, there will never be a solid tile on an area that the player is allowed to walk. That's how nav mesh works. Players can walk on empty tiles, not solid tiles, but raycasts only work on solid tiles and not empty tiles. So to fix this, I created a copy of the bottom floor layer, spilled a paint bucket of solid tiles onto it, and set that tile layer to disable just before baking the nav mesh, and then re-enable it after the nav mesh was finished baking. The nav mesh never sees the solid tile layer, and the click to move ray does. Whee! Since not every map has been given this 3D treatment yet, I did make a way for the camera and perspective to shift back to the 2D view for maps that have not been converted. Over time, as I work on each map, they will slowly all be made into their 3D counterparts. Here's some other quick stuff that I had to get sorted out. Monsters need to use 3D colliders now so players can properly click on them in 3D space, and pretty much every flat object on the ground had to be moved up 1 pixel so it doesn't flicker in and out of existence as it shares the exact same elevation with the floor. But enough about all that. There have been 2 cool new things that I managed to get added. The first is depth of field. It's pretty subtle, but it adds a lot to the immersion. Things really close or really far get just a tiny bit out of focus like one would expect in a 3D environment. I'm not sure if I'll have a setting in-game to turn it off by the time this devlog comes out, but I do understand that not everybody cares for depth of field, so trust me, there will be a setting to disable it. And last but not least, fog. I have shown fog in these devlogs twice before, but not like this. No, those last times were just a semi-transparent texture overlaid on the camera. No, this is real, height-based, volumetric fog. And I can control every aspect of it over the course of the day-night cycle. Density, elevation, color. This is my new favorite toy. And I really have to give a shout out to the asset dev for this. I was having a very Noia specific issue with the fog and I reached out to them on Discord. They actually made me a custom build for this tool so it would specifically work with transparent sprite textures in Noia. So thank you, Boxophobic, you absolute shader wizard. And I think I think that just about covers it all. It should go without saying, but with all of these changes, there are going to be bugs. So if you encounter any, it would be really cool if you could hop on the Discord and throw it into the bugs section. And if you do like what you're seeing and you want to see more, you should hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be working on getting the Underworld converted to 3D next. So what do you guys think of all these new changes? Let me know down in the comments. And that's it for this week. These 2 past weeks have been an absolute crunch working on Noia, both good and bad. I don't think I've ever put in this much work in 2 weeks on anything before. So that being said, I'm probably going to dial it back for a little bit. I don't think that converting the Underworld to 3D is going to be all that difficult, so that'll be a good opportunity to kind of coast for a little while. In other news, I am expecting a new tile set from Clockwork Raven here any day, so I do look forward to playing with that. All that being said, I gotta get back to work. So, see you next time. Bye.